apologies. No apologies.
Yes, Paul Free. Paul's at Balmoral Show.
Oh, aye.
He's double job and he's looking after the interests of the farmers. He's chairman of agriculture.
Okay, next we move to agenda item number 2, which is draft minutes. That's at page 4.
Page 4.
Okay, so are members content with the detail and accuracy of the minute? Great, thank you. Chairperson's minute business, there are no papers in this. Oh, just informs that there are. Sorry, right. The retirement of the Northern Ireland Tourist Board Chief Executive, Alan Clark, Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Tourist Board, will step down at the end of September after 13 years in the post. So if we are content to write and wish him well in his retirement, and appropriately too for the purpose of the minute, that we write and drop a card to Aidan Stennett, the researcher for the committee, wishing him well too and congratulations on his upcoming wedding. Okay, now can we move then to...
Sorry, Chair, just come back to Alan Clark. We also commend him as well in terms of Giro d'Italia.
Oh, yes.
I think he's going to retire, you know, at the highest level. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realise that apparently he's 63.
Really?
On the well.
Well, he stands at well.
Grey hair in his head, unlike myself.
So,
yes.
Now can we just move to a resume then of our course of action on the petroleum licence for the purposes of the minute? Would you just give us a resume of what has been... All right. Right, well, we can take it now just to get it done and dust. So, remember, the committee had requested research on this issue from Assembly Research. We have a draft request to Assembly Legal Services along with correspondence from Assembly Research regarding the complexity of the case, and the alternative approach, of course, to this would be that the committee request further information from the department, including an oral briefing before finalising a request for legal advice, and the research requested should be available prior to the oral evidence session from the department. So our members agreed with that course of action? Yes? Thank you. Agreed. Now, we'll move back then to the briefing, the Invest NI. Okay. So, an oral briefing from Invest NI on the end of year outturn. This item of business will be covered by Hansard, so electronic devices, with the exception of assembly tablets, should be switched off as they may interfere with this. So, papers for this item are at page 11, include the Clerk's brief, Invest NI Brussels bulletin, measuring Northern Ireland's exports, and included in the tabled papers is a briefing paper from Invest NI and also a second Clerk's briefing. Briefing the committee today are Mr. Alistair Hamilton, the Chief Executive, and Mr. Mark Ennis. You're both very welcome indeed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for being with us. Now, there is one item that we need to seek a wee bit of clarity on. The papers for this, it's a very, very busy time for elected representatives. The papers for this in the last 3 times have come late, and normally we expect efficiency in terms of the delivery of papers to ourselves at least 5 working days before the committee can have time for members to peruse them. It's not an efficient way of operating by any standards for a scrutiny committee to be presented with details, particularly in the height of an election, whenever members are out and about and very, very busy, more so than ever. Is there any particular reason why that inefficiency has now become practice?
I wasn't aware, Chair, because we passed the papers to the department, and obviously it goes from us to the department and to yourselves. So I'd certainly take that back and investigate it. It was certainly passed on by us in good time. So.
Right, okay. It's just that it may well lead to us having to call you back for another session because members may not have had time to fully peruse the papers, you know.
I fully and I apologise for that, but I will look into it. But they were produced by us in a very timely manner, Chairman.
That's good to hear. We'll do the wash over here today and look at stuff, but it may well be another session with yourselves, possibly on I think it's June the 12th.
And through the Chair, if any of the members, given that circumstance, again I apologise, feel like wanting to give me a call at any time, you know, it's just to answer a query, whatever, I'm more than happy to do that.
Oh, no, that's grand. Thank you for that. So, Now, the normal format for the meeting is just to move to yourselves to give us an overview of the documentation and of what your presentation for us here, and then we'll take the Q&A session.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
If it could, what I'll do is I'll take you just through the first couple of slides, and then Alistair's going to take over and go through the detail. And at any time, if you want to ask questions or whatever, it's up to yourselves. That's fine.
Okay.
I think in the forward, and we just talk about our corporate plan, I suppose what I'm delighted to say as an overview, I'm not going to talk through exactly what's written, that we're delighted this is a record year for our Invest. In fact, it's the best year in the history of either Invest or its predecessor in terms of job creation and investment, with almost 11,000 jobs in a single year and over $1 billion in investment. So from our standpoint, we actually are delighted with the results. And I think when you go into those results and you start to look at there's a good geographic spread, there's a good industry spread, and there's a good take-up in the jobs fund from people off the unemployment register. Those are some of the really key highlights that show that we're making a difference. And I think that difference, and again, I can say this, Alistair probably can't, I see it from the standpoint of what we've done internally with Invest in terms of making it a much more customer-focused organisation, and you're starting to see a bit of traction. And we've got some really good, I think, management development programs now in place that are really starting to pay dividends. And we get that feedback from the customers, and it's not me just pontificating about it. So that'll be the first thing to say. I think the second thing I would bring to the committee's attention is that we do face changes in the regional aid programme. And you'll notice a lot of job announcements coming up in the next couple of months, even though we've had a record year. And that is because at the 30th of June, the rules for selective financial assistance changed for large companies. So companies involving over 250 employees, there's a change. And basically that change, without going into all the detail of it, affects a business. If they want to invest in Northern Ireland, they get supported once. So if you think about how our FDI programme tends to work, we get large corporations who come in, they'll do a smaller project in the first instance to see is it work, or do they like it and everything else, and then they do a big follow-on project. That's going to have some difficulty. Now, we're working with the European Union under those rules, and it's an EU rule, it's nothing to do, it's a directive. The directive is targeted against car companies who have been abusing the grant system. We're a fallout of that particular action. So we are working with Europe in terms of trying to make that as palatable to us as possible. But just what it has meant, though, we have, as you would imagine, have advised those that we think are going to invest that there's this change may be coming. So it's brought forward a decision process for a number of companies. So we have an awful lot of activity between now and the 30th of June, all of which is very positive for Northern Ireland. But it just by way almost of setting expectation for the period after the 30th of June, we will see a little lull in terms, I think, in terms of FDI, and we're just going to have to work very hard. The good news, which Alistair will also tell you, of course, is that a lot of our activity has been with Indigenous companies, our own companies, and that's been fantastic for us, and that will be maintained. And most of our companies are well below the 250 mark, then that won't impact them at all. So just moving on to the sort of headline results. In our corporates, we're quite tough, I think, internally on ourselves, and we've got a balanced scorecard. We met 26 out of our 30 objectives, and that's fantastic. And we'll touch on the ones that we didn't meet as well as we go through. Alice goes through his presentation. But almost 11,000 jobs. That's 24,000 jobs since 2011. And we had our staff conference the day before, and I was trying to give people a feel for what does 24,000 jobs look like. 24,000 jobs. We're in the Spire Centre. And effectively it would have filled that centre 50 times over. And I just said to our own team, I said, think of the families you've impacted, that you've given that opportunity to. I think it's a great achievement. Over $1 billion investment, almost 250,000 in R&D investment, and again, a lot of that is local. And exports, which is a target, one of the targets we haven't hit. But despite that, we've seen a 10% growth in exports in the last 4 quarters. Those are the big headlines. So I'll maybe hand over to Alistair to
Okay, if you want to turn to slide 3 in your pack, and again, as I look around the room, I'm probably in a situation of apologising to some people on the colour situation. Again, although probably some of the members that did complain in the past have got tablets in front of them, so you'll be able to see the difference between the red and the green in terms of the targets. But I probably would say, Chairman, that this year, of all the years that I have been in front of this committee, there's probably more green on my scorecard than there has ever been in terms of the performance.
What do you think of that, Gordon? Not good.
I'll say nothing more because I will get myself into trouble. First point to make is 25 out of the 30 corporate scorecard balance targets were achieved. The Chairman's already said we'll cover off the 5 that weren't. You already have got indication in terms of the export target, which at this point was 13%, with a 20% ultimate target for next year. I suppose the bad news is that's running just under 7% at the minute, but bear in mind it was under 2% at this point last year. It has made a significant recovery in the last 12 months. Matter of fact, we were at the start of last year below the point at which we started the corporate plan, so it had gone down below the original starting point. It's now recovered. To see 10% growth in the last 4 quarters, I think if we can maintain that, would allow us to get towards that 20%. Maybe not at the end of the 4-year period, but maybe inside 5 years, which is what I would expect that we could do with a good tailwind. Second one was there were 2 targets on the growth loan fund. One was the volume of loans given, and the other was the value of loans given. The volume has not met its target, but the value has exceeded its target by almost 20%. I'll be very frank with you, I'm much more focused on the value than the volume. The reason why there's a difference between the two is the business case, which was always a business case in which you make some assumptions, did not rightly get the balance between volume and value, and the actual value of loans that are going out is significantly greater than the business plan predicted, but I'm not at all concerned. We're well ahead on the value of loans that are going out to small businesses through that growth loan fund. The other area we put a particular focus on this year, having achieved significant steps forward in terms of our casework handling and reducing that to 14 days from well over 30, we've put a focus on our claims handling, and we set ourselves a target to get that down to 35 days, and that's on an average across all of our projects, large and small. We were in August at 55 days, just to give you a benchmark of where we were. We managed to get to 35.8 at year end. I know that internally probably my staff think I'm very hard at not giving them 35 on 35.8, but nevertheless we didn't hit the target, so therefore that one's red on the scorecard. Just to give you an indication, that's a rolling average. On a spot month for March, we delivered in 22 days. So I'm very confident that we'll be able to get well below 35 on a rolling average for the rest of the year. If I then step into the headline results, I think the thing that we're particularly pleased with this year is that in both jobs, assistance, investment, salaries, offers and the number of businesses across all of those metrics, we've delivered the highest results that we've ever delivered as an organisation since the inception of Invest NI in 2001. Mark's given you a little bit of a flavour as to some of the reasons why that might be the case in this year because of the flow through of projects before we hit that deadline, but nevertheless it has been an exceptional year. 243 million in R&D investment. And you'll see that that's 409 million over the 3-year period. You know, I've often spoke at this committee about the progress in R&D, and that continues, and that is significantly up in last year. And exports I've mentioned. Slide 4, a breakdown in terms of the almost 11,000 jobs. And again, it's good to see local jobs continue to be up. And again, I know it's worth repeating, more local jobs promoted last year than there were foreign direct investment jobs. 6,000 local, almost 4,800 external. But the external up significantly at 75% up in the previous year, and a lot of that is through the projects that you have seen, some of them announced over the last few months, some of them to come, where we've managed to attract significant large-scale projects from inward investors. And it is interesting, I know we have a sub-target that I don't often report on, but just to give you visibility, in the back of the independent review we're asked to focus on brand new projects, so new names to Northern Ireland. And last year we brought 23 new projects to Northern Ireland, so brand new international names to Northern Ireland. The previous year that was 17. So again, last year up, and I think if you listen to what Mark has said a little bit around the changes that are coming forward you should expect to see more and more brand new names coming, because the selective financial assistance and the support mechanisms are non-discriminatory towards those brand new names, so we can support any size or scale of an operation for the first time into Northern Ireland, so we're driving that. Again, I've given you a bit of visibility on the startup and the jobs fund. The startup is another one of those 5. I've given you 3 so far. Another one of those 5 out of the balanced scorecard that we missed. Again, this has been well heralded over the last couple of years. We lost a year on the Startup Business Programme, as you all well know. However, we kept the target where it was, still with the ambition of delivering 6,500 jobs at the end of the 4-year period. We did 1765 last year. That's up 135% in the year before. So I can report to you today that we are now on a trajectory that, had we been on that for the 3-year period, we would be on target. But nevertheless, we're back on that trajectory again. And I think that's important, because this is one of the areas that will transfer to the new councils under the transfer of functions in local government reform. And it's important to get that programme stabilised again before it would transfer out. Jobs Fund has been a real highlight for us this year, and you know some of the projects, the Concentrics, Convergys type projects that we have brought this year, and again that's up well. Interesting to see that we continue to maintain above 70% in the job quality. So of those non-jobs fund projects, 73% of them have salaries above the private sector median, and that is a long-term strategic objective of the organisation to continue to do that. But 56% of all the jobs promoted have been promoted by local businesses, and again that's important for us. Slide 5. Volume up significantly again. I will refer to, as I go through the rest of my presentation, a couple of projects. I suppose I go back 3 years ago where I was showing you slides with the Bombardier C-Series project in it and without it, so you could get a trend that give you a little bit of visibility of how we had moved without what was at that stage in the C-Series a very large project. I've done the same again this year. There are 2 large investments that distort the numbers a little bit. One is the Northern Ireland Screen project, and the other is Bombardier. So we have just signed off our funding for Northern Ireland Screen, and the second Bombardier project is in the Cells project, which we have approved our funding, and therefore it's in our numbers. It is now going through EU approval to get the final approvals to allow Bombardier to proceed with that. But again, both of those are major investments. Last bullet point on that, 47% of the local R&D is by SMEs. I know another area you're particularly focused on around this committee to make sure that the support for R&D is driven and supported in the SME community across Northern Ireland. Next 3 slides you're familiar with, I'll not linger on them. Volume of offers continues to rise. So we're now up over 5,000, 7% up in last year. Again, just a highlight here, 94%, it was 93 last year, 94% of our support by volume is with local companies. And that's driven by the strategic changes that we've made that you've been aware of and involved in over the last 4 years, getting us out into the boosting business environment and supporting small business through our customer support function as well. Next slide, 7, value of assistance is a factor of that. You can see clearly here the value of the assistance that we've given to Northern Ireland Screen, 43 million. And again, it's an important point, and you may get this back a little bit. In the creative industry, we all know how important that sector is and how it has grown over the last 3 or 4 years. Northern Ireland Screen's plea to us was, give us some assurance on a longer period than a 1 year, because we used to give them just a 1 year budget. They need to make commitments to companies that are longer than 1 year. Their plea was to give them visibility of what their budget would be over a longer period of time. We've now done that. But again, you would be aware that that number represents a sizable slice of our overall budget. So therefore, thankfully we haven't been in the situation of having budget discussions around this committee for a while. No doubt that may come as things move in the future, but that represents a sizable slice of our budget. The Bombardier being 20 million as well. But even if you net those 2 pieces out, I'm sure you've already done the sums, without those 2, our support to local companies has gone up 30% and our support to external companies has gone up 14%. Without those projects included. Planned investment then is what is leveraged on the back of that by the way of support from those firms. And again, you can see the numbers there in terms of the 1 billion of planned investment. This is the first year ever that we have gone above £1 billion of leveraged investment within the year. And again, I think that's a very positive place for us to be. But nevertheless, 57% of our planned investment by locally owned businesses. So 94% by volume, 57% by value for local businesses. Satisfaction, customer satisfaction, staff satisfaction, again, two things that we drive very consistently. Very pleased to report that this year, again, both have moved. Our customer satisfaction has gone up by another 1% to 80. And for those who perhaps benchmark some of these things with external, including private sector organisations, that is in the upper quartile of performance for customer satisfaction. And I know as I speak to many of you, as I go around, I hear very positive messages from you in terms of how the businesses out there see a change in the organisation and find us much more proactive as opposed to reactive. It's still only 80%. There's still 20% that's not there. So there's still room to move. The dissatisfaction is a key one for us, and it was off the chart now in 2008, 21%. So it's gone down from 21% to 5% over that 6-year period. And again, it's something that the board are very focused on. And I'm very pleased that we've gotten there. Staff satisfaction has now gone up from about 58% to 62, almost 63%. And again, we're starting to see, having gone through a period of change in the organisation, and that change always creates a little bit of uncertainty for the organisation and for staff. I think we've bottomed that out, and Mark has already talked about some of the programmes, the Business Development Academy for all customer-facing staff, and the Leadership Development Programme for the leaders in the organisation starting to bear fruit in terms of that. Slide 10 gives you a visibility, as Mark has said, on both volume and geographic location and sector. What is a very pleasing set of results as far as we're concerned, from manufacturing to service centres into IT and software development, right across the board, and some of those projects coming as a result of support from a ministerial level, particularly the Japanese investments with Ryobi and Fujitsu, but also some of them coming out of the investment conference, which I'll speak about just as I close. Slide 11 then gives you an up-to-date picture in terms of where we are against the programme for government. Now with 23,782 jobs promoted, and you can see very clearly on this slide, having delivered 5.7 in year 1, 7.2 in year 2 and 10.8 in year 3, a massive uplift in terms of jobs promoted, almost 24,000 jobs against the 25,000, and I already hear people talking about soft targets, and I'm sure we'll maybe have some of that discussion here as well. But we have set ourselves a target for next year of 8,000 jobs, so while it will come down a little bit from the 10.8. We're still targeting a bigger number than we've done either in year 1 or year 2. And if we deliver that 8,000, you're looking, obviously you can do the sums as quickly as I can do, you're looking at 30 to 32,000 jobs over the 4-year programme for government period. £1 billion of investment already exceeded at 1.5. Wages and salaries of 266 million already exceeded at 306. And slide 12, the R&D, again, the Bombardier project's in the middle of that, but nevertheless, it is still a significant project. I don't want to give the impression that I'm always removing it out of our numbers. I only do it so you can track year on year with some consistency. But at 402 million of R&D spend against the target of 300, strategically, that is a superb place for us to be. And then lastly, on the skills side, 87 million ahead of the 3-year point and well on target to deliver the 110 at year end. Slide 13, Jobs Fund. It was a programme that had split targets. The promoted end of it was targeted at 6,300. We're now at almost, just over 9,000. And then very critically, they delivered, or they created side of that a target of 4,000. And it was always the challenging one. I remember around this committee some difficult questions way back 2 years ago whenever we started the Jobs Fund about the slow start and whether we were actually going to get to the creative position. And therefore, you can understand today why I'm so pleased that the organisation has delivered over the 4,000 target in jobs created. Mark has noted, and I think it is an important piece, that we have done the analysis now and are able to report today that across those Job Fund projects, those 4,679 jobs, that 55% of them have been taken up by people who were, at the point they recruited, on the unemployment register. And there were 2 objectives of the Jobs Fund. 1 was to create jobs quickly, and 2 was to actually try and offer an opportunity for people who were on the unemployment register and try to do something about that. And I think it has delivered really well against that. Slide 14. I'm delighted to be in the position this year to be able to present to you, as I forecast, the jobs created position. So just a little bit of a recap. We were able to measure it accurately for the Jobs Fund for the last year and a half. We were not able to do it for all of the other programmes for the reasons that are well rehearsed, basically because there are 4,500 live letters of offer that are now in the system that we need to analyse. You need to do it at press a button. I can't afford to do it manually, because if you come back in a month's time and ask the same question, I have to go through the whole manual process again. We've invested in the system, it's up and running. All of our live letters of offer that were live at the start of this programme for government period in 2011 are now on that system. So I am able to accurately tell what jobs have been created out of letters of offer that were live at that point or have been added subsequent to that point. Again, I will put a health warning on this, and again, this is new territory for all of us, and the health warning is, while I have no difficulty with the numbers, please let's try to be careful about trying to compare jobs created during a year with jobs promoted during a year. Those two categories, those two groups of numbers have only a very small overlap between them, because there are very few jobs that we promote during the year that people get round to actually creating, because there's usually a five-year timeline. So my word of warning is, don't take our 10,800 and the number that's on this page of 6,100 and say 6,100 of the 10,800 have been created. They are different subsets of projects, and I'm sure there may be questions on that. But where we are at the minute is, in 2011-12, 5,667 jobs were actually created. That is not on jobs that were promoted during that year, it's jobs that had a letter of offer that were live during that year. And similarly, 5,900 for 12-13, 6,100 for 13-14. I suppose the headline is that almost 8,000 jobs have been created over the last 3 years as a result of the work and the support that Invest NI have given to firms. I hope I've been clear in terms of the overlap between those two groups. I'll give you a few percentages just so that you can then...
We're just running on time, if you could. That's okay. Please, Alistair.
That's okay. I'll step on then and leave that to questions. Investment conference, slide 15. I'll skip over. You've well covered in it. Three issues then as we move forward. One is regional aid. Mark's already covered it a fair bit. The key piece that is a fact that he has covered, which is large company follow-on investment. We have been strategically moving our support into areas that are not affected by this. You see us much more active in supporting R&D to bring investors in, and around skills and assured skills to support companies, and therefore our dependence on selective financial assistance has diminished over the past few years. Local government reform represents a major challenge for all of us. It's a major change in that the Business Start, Social Economy and some other programmes like that will transfer to councils inside the next 12 months, and we are trying to build plans with those new councils, embedding ourselves into the middle of those community plans to make sure that we get as smooth a transfer as we can. Corporation tax, my last comment, Chairman. You know, we sit here a few months away from a decision in corporation tax, and while we have challenges in regional aid and some other areas, corporation tax, if it is granted and if the Assembly decides to exercise the option to take that to a number south of where we are at the minute, represents a major opportunity for our organisation. We have publicly committed that we will double the amount of FDI with a lever such as corporation tax at a 10-12% level, and we still stand to that position. So we stand on the threshold of a position where, with such tremendous results as we have this year, a little bit of a forecast that will not be as good next year, but it'll still be well ahead of the average of the first 2 years. We are on the threshold, if the decision is taken positively and if this Assembly decides to move it forward, where we will have a tremendously strategic tool that will allow us to continue the trajectory that we're on at the minute of continuing to provide jobs into Northern Ireland through foreign direct investment and supporting local companies. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And just a number of comments, and I've reflected them to yourself personally last Thursday evening at the Giro event. Yes, there is a perceptible change for the better among how Invest NI is performing, and it's right and proper that we should reflect that to you. Indeed, I've had numerous occasions where I've been involved with some businesses, and the outcome has been very productive and good and efficiently delivered.
Thank you.
So that's important to reflect on that, and it's good to see your staff outreaching more with elected representatives too, which is happening as well on the ground. Can I just ask a few questions around this jobs promoted versus jobs created, or jobs promoted along with jobs created. For me, anyway, the only jobs that are relevant are the actual jobs where somebody's stepping in and drawing a week's pay or a month's pay at the end of the month. So, do you correlate the two? You have actual figures there. What I'm trying to get at is the jobs promoted thing, is it just a hypothetical thing?
No, not at all. No. The jobs promoted are contracts that we sign with companies.
I appreciate that.
It is a lead indicator for
It's
you.
the pipeline, effectively, Chairman.
Yes.
It's the pipeline of what's going to come down that
Yes.
ultimately we go to jobs created. So if you don't have the pipeline, you're not going to have the created jobs in the future.
I appreciate that, but the real one for delivery of disposable income to the local economy in a given year, week or month or whatever it is, are actual jobs created.
Yeah.
So, and that's the one that's immediately of concern to me. I appreciate the strategic overview and where you're going, and that's crucially important as well, which brings me on to the next question. And I saw there that 94% of the offers, letters of offer, were to local businesses. What is the percentage uptake of those letters of offer, and how does that relate to previous years, say last year, the year before, whenever we're in recessionary times? I know the reason I'm asking that is I'd be anticipating a much better uptake. What is that?
Well, the volume that's there indicates the uptake. So if you go back...
Sorry, I'm asking the letters of offer that go out, the percentage of those that then become realisable, that actually happen, by comparison to previous years, where they may not have happened because of lack of resource, lack of finance, maybe banks not buying in or whatever. Are you noticing a perceptible improvement in that?
Well, I don't have those numbers with me in terms of letters of offer that have gone out, and those I can get those for you. I'm happy to write to you with them. But let's remember, the vast majority of this are not large-scale job projects. The large volume of this are single letters of offer that go to small businesses.
Appreciate that.
Some of them are around marketing support, some of them are around the finance voucher, the innovation voucher. Those are, I wouldn't want to say 100%, but there's very little drop-off in those. The majority of those people who get a gap letter of offer or a marketing or an innovation voucher or a finance voucher, the vast majority of those are drawn down. So I wouldn't want to characterise those with comments that you may have picked up that I have made in the past, where we've made offers to firms to create 200 jobs, and because the economic downturn has come along, they've either parked it, suspended it, or not put it through fully. The vast majority of those letters of offer have already been taken up or will be taken up. So there's not a big concern for me on the slowdown of letters of offer being enacted.
No,
Chairman,
it's quite the opposite that I was meaning.
Yeah.
Chairman, if I could make just 2 points. One, I'm delighted because we're the first agency in United Kingdom or Ireland to actually record properly jobs created. Nobody else has done it. So that's a first for all agencies. So I commend the team for doing it. And you're right, because that's where the tires hit the road in terms.
That's right.
In terms of just, if I pick it up, the confidence level that we see coming through, I would say since the middle of last year, we've definitely seen an increase in confidence level across most sectors. And the feedback we're getting in, so we are seeing the uptake, and perhaps maybe answer your question in a slightly different way. The speed of uptake of some of the letters of offer has increased, and that, I think, reflects people's confidence and belief that the economy is improving.
It would be helpful if there is some sort of an analysis that you have done. I presume you have done that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The offers that have gone out and their uptake, because I would be hoping and anticipating, based on your general comment there, Mr. Ennis, that you would see a marked increase in the percentage of uptake. I would be hoping anyway. Now, just I'm drawing you onto another area of corporation tax, and clearly you're doing a wee bit of work around corporation tax and how that might outwork. I believe there was to be a report available on Grade A office accommodation, which clearly would be pivotal, because I already know that there have been instances of firms here who were looking for that Grade A office accommodation, and unfortunately it wasn't available for them in the likes of Belfast here. So, are you aware of the contents of that report or the conclusions of that report, and when might it be available for wider perusal?
Well, first of all, I know that some people have reported difficulty with Grade A property, but we have had no issue with any of our companies that are in our work in progress pipeline at the minute with office accommodation.
Oh, it wasn't those that I was thinking of.
No, I know that, but as far as I just want to
I'm
state,
thinking of it, if they hadn't a problem with it, they wouldn't. They're already here if they hadn't a problem with it.
No,
but if they had a problem with it, they wouldn't be in your pipeline. That's my point.
No, but generally office accommodation is something that's discussed after we get a company engaged. There are no companies in our work in progress pipeline who have said they are not going to be able to invest here or their project is jeopardised because of the lack of Grade A property.
No, well, I would have been expecting that anyway. If they had a problem with it, they wouldn't be here.
Well, but you could get somebody, because our projects take an 18 to 24 month cycle. It is feasible that if Grade A was such an issue, that there might have been a company we have engaged 12, 18 months ago, and we're now getting to this point and we had a challenge. That is not the case. So Grade A property is not a short-term issue for us. It is a medium, long-term issue.
Right.
So in terms of the Grade A property piece, I'll answer the question in terms of the report just in a few seconds. There's started to be a bit of development. So there's property starting to be developed around the harbour. There's planning permission now applied for in property down Titanic Quarter. I'm talking about Belfast here.
Yes.
And there's property development underway by way of refurbishment within the city centre as well, and we've just heard the news around the potential for another of our investors to redevelop the Macefield Leisure Centre. So there is a bit of movement now starting to happen. I agree that there are challenges if that doesn't move particularly quickly in the future, that we could get into a situation where we're starting to run out of it. In terms of the report, we expect that report to be available inside the next few weeks. So as soon as that's available, we'll be publishing it.
Okay, that's grand. Thanks for that. Mrs. Overend, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to the committee. Thanks for your presentation. I'd really like to touch on exports and the measurement of exports and your targets. That's one of the ones that you're not meeting at the minute. And I know there's the department's looking at how exports are measured, and there's difficulties in that. But maybe you could provide us with some information on really how much focus are you putting on exports, and what are you working to do to improve that? And I mean, my husband's been in other countries on export missions, and he's hearing whenever he's out there that there needs to be more focus on networking, on promoting Northern Ireland in other countries, rather than the FDI aspect of it. So I'm just wondering, what is the balance of your work in regard to FDI and actually promoting Northern Ireland when you're out there and finding new markets?
I maybe just give it some of the issues and then let Alistair come up with the solutions and what we're doing on it, give him the good stuff. One of the issues we have that has impacted our numbers is the fact that whenever we have exports coming from Northern Ireland, they're usually consolidated somewhere before they're shipped on to somewhere else. And if you go back a number of years, a lot of that consolidation took place in the Republic because of the way we measure, and the only thing we measure is manufacturing exports. Because it has to go through customs and excise, effectively give us the numbers. There was a fairly significant switch with the downturn in the economy in the south to that consolidation taking place in the UK. As a consequence, we don't get any recognition for it. So it wasn't actually that we stopped exporting, it's that the exports were rerouted, and as a consequence, we don't pick it up in the results. And for me, it's a very frustrating situation. Also, we have no measurement on our export services, which has been a phenomenal success story from a Northern Ireland perspective. It's something we would love to shout about, and we really have to get to some stage where we get some ability to measure sales from Northern Ireland as opposed to exports. It is one of the most frustrating things I have now. Having expressed my frustrations, I will now hand to Alistair's, because there's a huge amount we're doing, but I won't.
I think just to answer the key question, the balance or the focus in the organisation between trade and investment has moved significantly over the last 2 years. So much so that at the beginning of this year I took the decision to actually integrate the two teams. You may have heard me talk a little bit here before about trying to connect both trade and investment to get upsell and cross-sell opportunities. Well, now we've physically merged the two teams together from January of this year. So we now have a combined trade and investment organisation. The overseas country managers, who previously were only targeted on inward investment, are now targeted on both trade and inward investment. So we've built multidiscipline teams in the 4 geographic patches that we manage across the world. We've also recruited additional trade advisors, because up until 2 years ago, all of our trade activity was pushed out from here. So there was a trade team here, they went to exhibitions or they went on trade missions along with companies and they came back home again. There was nobody left there to carry on that connection. Over the last 2 years, we've recruited somewhere in the region of about 20 people between our own people and consultants in geography. The latest one being in South America, and we just returned from a very profitable trade mission to Colombia just a few weeks ago with that individual leading that up. So there's a lot of work now around having trade advisors in geography. The second thing that we've done is we've recruited some sector specialist people, and I suppose the prime example here would be the construction sector, where we recruited a guy, Nick, in London, who previously worked for the Olympics Authority and was involved in all of the procurement around the Olympics projects. And his job, full-time, is to make sure that we connect Northern Ireland construction companies with the large construction projects, the likes of Crossrail and other projects that are currently underway, primarily in London, but beyond that into the rest of GB. So it's a much more, in tune with the other things, a much more proactive approach in terms of actually making sure that companies know what contracts are coming up. And again, we will go quite far down the line of supporting firms whenever they put their tenders together and making sure that they've got the best advice from us about the things that will set them apart and profile them in the best possible place whenever they bid for those projects. And that's starting to bear fruit. I spent yesterday morning, our international team are all home at the minute, and well, actually they're home here, they're actually heading to Fermanagh for the much promised visit to Fermanagh for 3 days. But whenever they were home, I met for 2.5 hours yesterday morning with the country heads, and the only thing we talked about was trade. We didn't even get on to the foreign direct investment. And I hope that gives you a flavour of the focus from the senior level right down through the organisation in terms of our desire to be able to deliver this. I will tell you, I had the opportunity to present to all of the staff at the staff conference, as Mark said, on Tuesday. And I made a very specific point of saying, having delivered such a wonderful set of results in terms of our scorecard, the one thing that I want to do on behalf of the organisation is try to close the gap on that trade target, because that is success for us in terms of a suite of R&D, inward investment, local company support and trade and exports, and that's the focus that we have on it.
It would be fair to say that we have actually improved and met our targets on the emerging countries where we've been hit, and it's a reflection, probably a little bit of the economic circumstance, is, you know, our main export markets, which were Europe and the Republic, and they have taken a little bit of a hammering. But the point you make is absolutely right, that we need to focus on exports, and that's why I wanted Alistair to tell you, because we're making a huge effort, and it's one of my personal goals for the organisation to increase that export market.
Okay, no, I'm glad to hear that you're ahead of the question. You've got the right answers. I'm concerned maybe that you've combined the role of the same person that's looking at FDI with trade. No. As long as they've got the good links with Northern Ireland, that they know what's happening here, you know, the link needs to be between what we've got to sell and promoting it out there.
No, the people we've recruited overseas are dedicated trade specialists. The only person who carries a joint target is the country head. So those 4 people I met with yesterday have a joint target for trade and investment. Once it gets below their level, you're in specialisms, business development for FDI, and then trade specialisms for the trade.
Okay, that's great. I mean, Northern Ireland has so much good to sell, so it's good to get it across there. Okay, thanks. Can I just ask one totally separate question? With regard to local government, there was a pilot office set up in Fermanagh, a sub-regional, I can't remember the particular phraseology of what it was. How's that pilot progressing, and are you talking about opening other offices in Mid-Ulster, for example?
Our intention is to have an office presence in each one of the 11 new council areas. I think that was perhaps some of the answer that we maybe give back to you. So yes, using that as a pilot, we did one in Coleraine a few years ago, and we did the one in Enniskillen or Fermanagh Fermanagh. Yes, our intention is to have a regional office network such that we have a presence in each of those 11 council areas.
Can you give an example of any success stories out of it or anything?
Well, I think there's two things. One is that office, but the other bit is the pop-up office piece, which again you may be aware of, that we've tried over the last 12 months, where it may not be enough just to maintain a full-time presence in some of the areas. The pop-up office worked particularly well for us. I think from memory we were in Limavady. We did one in Belfast, and I can't remember where the third one was. But those worked well, where we signal well in advance to people we're going to be there. We'll be there for a week. We either take a shopping centre location, or we take an office or a shop front somewhere on the main street. We've the right people there on a focused area for a full week, and that has been very successful for us, where people know if they turn up they're going to get access and talk to people. No appointments need to be set, they just turn up. I expect that in the next 12 to 18 months we'll run more of that pop-up office feature. And the benefit of that is it's not, you don't have to pick whether it's Macrofelt or wherever. You can move it about and try and catch people as you move around.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Sandra. Mr. Flanagan. Phil.
Thanks, Patsy, and gentlemen, thanks for your presentation. The last time I was here, I asked you what was the bad news or what didn't you tell us. I'll not bother asking that again. In terms of the state of the economy, we are seeing report after report indicating that growth is happening. And speaking to some people in the business community, it's certain that is the case. But speaking to citizens and people on the ground, they're not seeing the benefits of it reaching them yet. We're seeing statistics indicating that unemployment figures have went down for the 15th month in a row, and that's all very welcome. But behind those statistics, situations actually being masked by emigration, by underemployment, by the growing use of zero-hour contracts and self-employment, and by low pay. So one of the things I'd be keen to hear you discuss is what consideration you have given to the introduction of a stipulation that all the jobs created through Invest NI grant funding will include a requirement for employees to be paid at least a living wage.
It's something that I'm aware of. I think there needs to be a bit of further discussion around the living wage. So, for example, I looked a few days ago just to see, is there a living wage analysis for Northern Ireland? I think at the present moment in time, I haven't seen it. Maybe there is one. I'd be keen to see that. The benchmarks that I have are UK. I think there's a London living wage position, and there's a outside of London a UK position. If I do my sums correctly in that, I think private sector medians run about 19,000, national minimum wage run somewhere about 13,000. Living wage, if I take that outside of London, is probably about 16,000. So it's a pretty clear step between the three, and I stand to be corrected if there's other analysis around that. In terms of the position that we have from a legislative point of view, in terms of the initiatives that we drive, the two key numbers that we are focused on, obviously national minimum wage, we don't focus on it, but it's a legislative position that people need to pay the national minimum wage. The second one is PSM, and that is set within the programme for government in terms of a target, and we have driven very successfully and aggressively against trying to secure as many jobs as we can above that level, and you see the reported number that's in here. In terms of introduction, a third level to that, if there was either a change from national minimum wage to living wage, or putting restrictions into that, that's something that would need to be driven through from a policy point of view, as opposed to us just going off and trying to implement that. I think the second thing I would say is that we just, I suppose, need to be careful around setting too many levels of wage quality positions into our letters of offer. So as part of a discussion, I'm happy to get involved in the discussion around that, but as part of that discussion we need to understand the impact that will have on the various suppliers and companies that we support.
I think that there's a good point though in terms of, if you look at the number we've taken off the unemployment register, I mean that to me was a big success in terms of, you talk about making difference in an area. There's nothing that makes more difference than taking people who haven't got a job and actually giving them a job. And I think that to me was one of the success factors I felt of this year.
And how do you measure that? Is it a survey that's done when jobs are created, or how do you figure out how many people have come off the door and working now through intervention?
The questions are asked of the firms to provide that information to us so we could analyse it.
On jobs promoted or
on jobs created? That's on jobs.
Jobs created.
Okay. And if you've any idea, you can tell me the number of and the percentage of jobs that are paid above the private sector median. Yeah. Have you any idea what jobs are created between say whatever you determine a living wage to be, whatever rough calculation you've done between that and the minimum wage?
Well, those levels are not built into our systems, so if it would need to, that would all need to flow through. So a debate would need to take place if that was a policy direction for this assembly to actually stipulate that into the rules and regulations of our intervention.
But historically, can you go and look at for these job created?
No, we
figures?
asked for it. We asked for it in bands. So we asked for the information based on the targets we have, and the targets we have are based on private sector median. So we asked for the salaries that are above it or below the private sector median. We don't differentiate.
It's as simple as that. Okay, no, that's great. In terms of regional imbalance, it is one of the commitments of the programme for government, but it's not something that you've included in your presentation, and it's not something that I hear enough being talked about. And unfortunately, some people scoff at the idea that there is actually regional imbalance, but then their party signed up to the programme for government, so it has to exist. So there is a commitment there within the programme for government to tackle regional imbalance. Can you give us a breakdown of where you've supported jobs being created and promoted?
So I think there's two pieces. One, you can look at the slide that we've provided to you in terms of the key projects that we've announced, and you'll know where those projects have been. And there's been a good balance of those foreign direct investment projects, I think, this year. Both Belfast and then outside of Belfast, some up in the northwest, some in County Tyrone, some of them just last week in terms of Carrickfergus and Antrim. So there's been a really good balance of projects right across Northern Ireland this year. I think in terms of local company support, the vast majority of that is driven in the communities in which those companies are there and are supported. So there's a really good balance of local company support in terms of a regional spread across Northern Ireland, proportionate to the population areas where people are. In terms of the overall breakdown of these numbers today into the sub-regional numbers, as always, as I say here, these are the headline numbers. Inside the next 2 or 3 weeks, then the regional breakdowns will be available, and we're happy to provide that to you.
Right. And how are you coping with the huge demand of companies seeking to invest in Fermanagh because the G8 took place there?
Well, I think we're down to hear all about that.
There's a wee bit of sarcasm in there.
I think, yeah.
Just in case.
I think we're probably today hearing from the council and the stakeholders in Fermanagh in terms of the proposition around there. That was a commitment that we made last year in terms of doing that. We have a couple of companies that are interested in the area, and therefore we'll continue to pursue those opportunities. But I hope more positively out of the engagement over the next couple of days that our international team, all of them are there, our international team will leave not just with a nice, albeit very positive, a nice headline message about Fermanagh and what it looks like and the G8, but they will leave with substantive information about the key unique selling points of that area, that region, that they can then take out and project to those potential inward investors.
And is your sales team engaging with the likes of Southwest College and members of the business community in Fermanagh that's there already?
Oh, absolutely. And there are two parts of the programme over the next 2 days are around the Southwest College and the connection there.
Okay. Have you any particular policies or incentives in place to encourage potential investors to locate in areas of disadvantage or neglect?
There are subsectors of the overall programmes. So in terms of the jobs fund piece, there is a particular the business startup programme. There is a particular part of the business start programme that is focused on the neighbourhood renewal areas. So therefore they will get financial support in the if they're located in the neighbourhood renewal area, whereas those who are not located there will not get the financial support. They'll get the rest of the advisory support that goes around it, but they'll not get the financial support. So yes, in some of the programmes there are incentives that are dedicated to those areas.
That's for startups. What about existing businesses that want to expand, or for foreign direct investors that are coming here? Have you any specific incentives to try and target them into areas of greatest need?
Well, for existing investors, I wouldn't want to be targeting them to move from one part of Northern Ireland to another. So usually they decide where they're going to set up an existing Indigenous business. So there's absolutely nothing, and I wouldn't want to go to a place where we were incentivising them to go from one part of Northern Ireland to another. In terms of the foreign direct investors, over the last 3 years there has been a financial incentive. There was a higher level of a threshold on the selective financial assistance that was available outside of Belfast as opposed to inside Belfast, and that helped us in some of those projects that have been announced over the last 3 months in terms of trying to locate them in those areas.
Right. And finally, on a different topic, how big of a problem is the high price of energy for large energy users posing for investing to attract people to come in here?
It is, so it's two parts to that question. It is a challenge for us, a challenge more for our existing manufacturers. While you'll look at that list and see some manufacturing expansions, the likes of Ryobi, Wrightbus a few days ago, Terex towards the tail end of last year, we have not been targeting, for a whole lot of reasons, tax reasons, but also perhaps now rising energy reasons, we have not been targeting manufacturers specifically. Our strategy over the last 5 years has been targeting financial services, IT and business services. I don't want to duck the question completely. I would register a concern that we have, and the Chairman actually has been discussed at board, that the differential for a lot of our international firms between energy costs in Northern Ireland and energy costs elsewhere on these islands or in their home countries is causing them a challenge, because a lot of these manufacturing plants, and you've heard this directly from them, get benchmarked on their costs versus the rest of their similar sister plants around the world, and increasingly, while they drive greater efficiencies and they've got better outputs and higher quality, the energy cost is becoming a bigger and bigger part of that debate as they discuss their future within a parent organisation.
And have you lost out on any projects because of the price of energy? Or have you just not been targeting them as hard as you could?
But I would register a little bit of a concern with you, not on the cost of the energy, but there are issues starting to crop up with the cost of connection to the grid. And particularly on your agenda, particularly as you go further and further from Belfast in terms of the grid infrastructure. So there are projects that we are discussing with people. These are mainly existing manufacturers on expansion where their choice of location is very much influenced by the grid infrastructure and how quick and cost effective it is for them to get access to that grid on a one-off connection. And some of the connection charges are quite substantial.
Chair, can I just ask a follow-up?
Phil,
I'm just going to say one thing and then I'm finished. So, we're doing a piece of work on the whole grid thing, so it might be appropriate for the committee to contact you to get more information on that issue.
Through the Chair, I haven't commented because I'm obviously conflicted being the chair of one of the energy companies. So.
I was going to ask, it might be helpful if we received a written briefing from yourselves as part of our inquiry into those costings and problems or difficulties that have been created in relation to connection to the
happy
grid.
To do that.
That's okay. Stephen, you're in the back.
Just
Piggybacking on this.
Quick point. Well, not says it all the energy companies' fault then. But just wanted to ask, the grid connection's a big issue. Would it be your understanding then that some of those companies, potential companies for investment, would actually accept a rise in energy cost if the investment was going into the grid?
I'd be very frank, I don't think they want either.
Of course not.
But
I mean, we have to make decisions.
whenever you benchmark the unit cost of energy in Northern Ireland versus some of our near neighbours, both east, west and north, south, then I think any increase in that unit cost, any increase in that energy cost, and I'm talking, there's a small subset here of very high energy users, then it will have a disproportionate impact on them. So I would like to see neither, but that's...
You'd like to see us invest in the
I
grid,
can
but not
make a comment
money.
that I don't think causes me conflict in terms of my interests. But unless you put the investment in the grid, which will obviously does increase cost, you will not ultimately end up with a reduced cost because we do not have we still do not have an indigenous fuel that we can turn around and pump out and take the benefit of. So the higher percentage of renewables that we have on the system, the lower the cost ultimately will be for the consumer. At the minute, when the wind blows, the wholesale price of energy within the Irish marketplace, and remember we have an all-Ireland marketplace, drops by about 10% at this point in time. Now, the mechanisms need to be in place for that to go through to customers, but the wholesale price...
That is the problem.
Yeah, and there is an issue around that. But the supply companies are pricing their product based on a view of that. So it does ultimately get through to customers. Maybe not as directly as the wind blows today, your energy is cheaper. But the problem, Chairman, is very much the base problem is very much the fact that we are very dependent on imported.
Right. Thank you for that. And just one thing in regard to that briefing on energy costs and connections to the grid and the likes of that. if you could, we have NIE coming before us on the 29th of this month. If it was at all possible to have that document available to us
Yeah.
before then, that would be very helpful indeed. Thank you. I have Mr. Dunn now. Gordon.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much. Gentlemen, I think we should all pass on our congratulations to Invest NI on their performance in the past year, and I think we all recognise the change that has been made within the organisation. And I think that congratulations should go right down through the structure, because you have a big team of employees, and obviously they're all playing their part in making a difference, so I think it's important we recognise that. In relation to the jobs, you have secured almost 1,100 jobs within Northern Ireland in the past year. It says here promoted.
11,000.
Sorry, 11,000. Yes, 11,000 is right. Yeah, almost. That's right. The local jobs, you have 6,000 and over 6,000. External jobs. Are these the new FDI type work?
Both new and existing companies expansion.
Expansion. Yeah. And they're all based here. There will be.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
There will be. Okay. Yeah. On the figures, some might say that the figures perhaps were somewhat challenging. Some may say that they weren't as realistic, perhaps, as they should have been. But I think we all recognise that we're coming out of recession. You know, following on from that, do you feel that the figures were as challenging as they could have been? And what do you think about?
If I could answer maybe initially, because on the you obviously ran for the position of chairman. Just before I took the position, the target was 21,500 jobs. On the morning that I was interviewed, the interviewer told me, well, what do you think of the target of 25,000 jobs? So I had immediately got an uplift of 4,000 jobs, which I wasn't anticipating. If you go back to that particular moment in time, 21,000 I thought was a real stretch. 25,000 was a very significant stretch. I think because of the success of Invest, I wouldn't under or demean the target that was set. It was a very tough target and is a tough target in a very difficult climate. The fact that we've battled through it, I think is great. And I think and remember, we don't actually create jobs or deliver it. It's the companies we help support that actually do that piece, that real piece of work.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a fantastic vote of confidence for the economy, and I think it's no small measure that the executive have put the economy at the heart of policy, and I think that's been terribly helpful. When you're dealing with outside companies coming to Northern Ireland and they hear all our politicians unite around the fact that an economy is such an important part, they don't always get that message everywhere else. So I wouldn't underestimate the role the executive played in that as well.
I think it's worthwhile also bearing in mind that while you don't change the programme for government target, we do change our targets every year. So our cumulative target for next year is 32,000 jobs, not 25,000. So if there's any feeling that because the climate has changed and we've been successful and we've found, let's be clear, we've found projects that we could not have envisaged that we would have found 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, whenever this programme for government was being developed. Nevertheless, I think you see we're not taking our foot off the pedal just because we've managed to get very close to the target. The 8,000 is in everybody's scorecard for next year, which, as I said earlier, is a higher average than the first 2 years of the programme for government put together. So there's no abating on our desire to continue to drive on behalf of the Assembly and the population out there to deliver results.
Can things, only get better next year, do you think? Or?
We'll not get better than 11,000 unless something miraculous happens in the middle of the year. Even corporation tax will make no difference because it'll not take impact for another 2 or 3 years. I think if we can deliver 8,000 jobs next year, we will be doing a super job.
Okay, we'll hold you to that.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's grand. Just for clarification, on the total planned investment, the 1.09 billion mentioned here in your NI screen, clarify what that money is for and
so that is
where it's located, I think, as well.
Well, I don't think anybody knows where it's located. So that money is an offer of financial support that has gone to Northern Ireland Screen. So the background to this is, as I mentioned earlier, I'll give you a little bit more detail. We used to only give them a 1-year budget, and therefore they had challenges making commitments on a longer term to the likes of HBO and Universal and BBC and some of the other firms. So what they've now done is they've asked us for a 4-year budget, and we have now given them that. So therefore, all of that commitment is all wrapped up in 1 year. So that's a 4-year programme of funding for Northern Ireland Screen, allowing them to go out and to secure more creative industry projects for Northern Ireland.
That money may not necessarily be drawn down, no.
They will draw it down.
Well.
Yeah, they have a track record of actually delivering against that budget. Yeah.
Well, Bombardier then, which is a great story, and I think we all appreciate the efforts that you have made in relation to it. The money going through there, is that coming out of the European Regional Development Fund?
So, yes, the majority of that is European funding, yes.
Is that going to alter again projects like this?
No, this is an R&D project, so under the rules changes we talked about in June, that will not change. Now, the R&D programme will get reviewed going forward. I can't remember the date that it gets reviewed, but it's not June of this year. But I think, if I understand or right the tone within the European Union, they will continue the plan that they are on, which is given less and less job-related support and more innovation-related support to drive that piece. So I expect that will continue.
Okay, and finally, just you mentioned about managing your letters of offer. 4,500 letters of offer is a big task to manage.
Yeah.
You know, how do you do that? Obviously, a lot of those projects will not ever come forward.
Well, actually, of those, the 4,500 are ones that actually have started to deliver. That's the population that we actually mine through the system. So in the system, all of those are now managed in such a way that we know the original employment level whenever that letter of offer was taken out. And we then, every time a claim is made and that claim is vouched and the employment baseline is assessed and approved, we then can do a sum between the original baseline and the employment at that point. And people make claims maybe every quarter or every 6 months, so it's a continually moving feast. What we can now do through the system is do that sum very quickly across 4,500 letters of offer across probably a 7-year timeline. Which is what we're talking about. And as I said before, we never could agree to do that manually. It always has to be a system, and it's taken us 2 years to put that system in place and get it populated. But we're now able to do it.
Okay,
It's a
good.
major success for us.
Well done, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
All right, Gordon. Just as we were moving into the area of R&D, as you know, the committee has majored a lot on R&D, FP7 and more recently its successor, Horizon 2020. To be honest, evidence that we've received has been a mixed bag in terms of how we would perceive things being motivated and moving here in the north by comparison to the rest of the island. What sort of measures and what essentially is InvestNI doing to avail? You said we're moving more into the innovative field and European level, and of course there's a lot of billions available there for that. What is InvestNI specifically doing in conjunction with the likes of the universities and your client base to encourage and nurture the drawdown of those fundings with a view to the future innovation products and indeed tied in with the sorts of companies that you would be hoping to attract through the reduction in corporation tax?
So I think whenever you get into the R&D, and particularly EU funding, I'll probably break it into 3 areas. First of all, there are those structural funds and maximising the use of those structural funds to support the work that we do. And every pound we draw out of those funds is a pound less that has to come from the block onto our baseline. What we've sought to do over the past probably 7, 8, 10 years is maximise the access to those funds. So these are not things that companies will bid for on a case-by-case basis. These are programmes that we run, that we fund through the European funding. And the major pieces of that has been the R&D. The majority of that R&D programme, including the Bombardier project, are all funded out of European funding. The second area is more around the support for the finance products, so the VC and the Growth Loan Fund.
Yes.
And we have managed to leverage, I can't remember exactly the percentage, but it's somewhere in the region of 20% of our funds in that suite of funding comes out of our baseline. The rest of it comes out of European funding. So there's a very high leverage of European funding into both VC and debt-based funding through the Access to Finance suite. I think the third area then is around smaller innovation programs, the likes of the innovation vouchers, which I mentioned earlier on, and getting into the university area in terms of some of the collaborative programs that happen between us and the universities on a company-specific basis. And these are the sort of knowledge transfer programs, the KTP for people that have been involved in them. Those are all European funded as well. So there's a very healthy suite of European funding across our base. Second thing is, and the balance of our budget, as we reduce our support on selective financial assistance around jobs, we increase our support in R&D. So if you were to look at our budget profile today versus where it was 7 years ago, there's much more of our budget been spent in R&D and much less been spent in job creation than there would have been 7 years ago. The last element is the one that you touch on, which is around then the European funding mechanisms that are there for companies to collaborate with other companies across the European Union and then to bid themselves directly to get access to that funding. And I acknowledge with you, I think that is an area that collectively we can all do more to try and help firms. You will know that the executive took a decision to put points of contact into various departments around Northern Ireland to try and support firms to get access to that. And I think it's started to work fairly well. But we probably need to get more heavily engaged in trying to support firms in the same way as we did with the construction projects in London, matchmake for them. We probably need to do more of that within our organisation, notwithstanding the fact that we do have the European Enterprise Network embedded within, but it probably needs to move a bit further.
Appreciate that. And in the doing more, I was kind of expecting to hear what's being done to do more. And on that front.
If I could maybe comment and give you some insight, because SSE have just submitted a Horizon 2020 project along with Glen Dimplex and Intel.
Right.
Those are three huge companies themselves. This is the Horizon 2020 is a competition, so you go in and you compete for a particular area of fund. Even with the resources behind those companies, it was a very significant piece of work. And I would say to you, I know that the attraction of billions always gets people's attention because you say, everybody says, well, there's billions in Europe that's going to give out. It's very, very difficult to access. We had to put a very significant team from an SSE perspective, from an Intel perspective, from a Glen Dimplex, working on this flat out for 3 months to get a presentation together to put in something that we may or may not win. We had to visit Europe on quite a number of occasions to lobby, to find out. Now, when you get to Europe, the door's open and they're very helpful in saying, well, we think your offer's good in this point, but we think it's... So the initial feedback, I don't think I'm giving anything away, was, well, it's all too Irish. You know, you're north and south, we understand, you have a bit of UK thrown in there, but you need to be a wider geographic. So we then sought and we ended up with other corporations involved with that particular bid on a European level. But that's the scale of it. Now, when you think of the companies that we do not have many companies, but the point I'm making is, from a Northern Ireland perspective, we don't have a lot of companies of that scale that are in a position to take advantage of even going for a submission to something like Horizon 2020. Yeah. It is a significant piece of work.
Yeah, but and I hear what you're saying, and we've been to Dublin and we've learned from Enterprise Ireland what they're doing, and granted the nature of the economy there and the types of companies there, and you're collaborating with one of them. But still, were I a person in a business with an innovative project, down below there are key officials within Enterprise Ireland. You go to them, they're dealing with the thematic areas.
And we have that.
Well, that's precisely what... I'm not so sure that that's so widely known. Yeah, and certainly it's limited what we're hearing here. And I know we're going down to see, and I think you have a conference coming up very shortly that I hope to attend as well. But it's having that capacity to make the information known to those who can avail of projects and of opportunities. That's a key issue. And I don't get the impression that that's quite kicked in yet.
Well, I wouldn't lose sight of the fact that Northern Ireland is the most attractive part of the UK. So we forget about funding streams. Come back to what people are trying to do. People are trying to drive innovation in R&D. Northern Ireland is the most attractive part of the UK in which to conduct your R&D, because it's the only part of the UK in which you will get both financial assistance from us through that European funding because of our regional aid status, or our European status, and secondly, a UK tax credit regime. And you can top it up even further if you go down the line of patent box. So every pound of R&D spent in Northern Ireland is costing, depending on the size of your company, it varies, less than 40 pence. If you maximise those positions. So you've got to really balance out the scale of companies in Northern Ireland and their ability to engage in the sorts of programmes that the Chairman has just spoken about, versus the return that they will get for that. In a lot of cases, people will get a better financial support through the existing R&D mechanisms than they will get out of Horizon 2020. And
But is it an either or?
well, it isn't either or. You can't double up in European funding.
No, I don't
support.
mean double up. I mean add extra capacity to a project.
No, you can't draw two elements of European funding into the same programme. You need to decide which.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking of the tax credits and all that stuff. Maybe I got a wee bit mixed up there in the telling.
Right. No, what we've tried to do, Chairman, is tried to look at the size of the companies in Northern Ireland and their ability to be able to, on one hand, comply and complete with, because even the R&D programmes, and I'm sure you've heard this, there are still, because of European fund, there's still a few hoops to jump through, even though they don't have to go and find another partner elsewhere in the European Union. So we try to balance their ability to be able to deal with those programmes and the funding they could potentially get on the various streams that are here. Ones that are facilitated and driven by us through European funding in our R&D programme, and others then through FP7 Horizon 2020. And I think we have a fairly good balance between those two. Horizon 2020 is not for all our companies.
No, I didn't ever suggest it.
No, I know that.
We've learned that much. No, we were out in Europe last year and learned a fairly bit about
I would close my comments, Chairman, with the point that let's benchmark ourselves in terms of R&D spend. 7 years ago, the R&D spend in Northern Ireland as a percentage of our GVA was 0.6%. The UK average at that point was 1.1. Today we are at 1.2. So in a period of
What's the UK average now?
still 1.1.
Okay.
So in a period of 7 years, we have moved from we've doubled the amount of R&D spend as a percentage of our productivity, our GVA, across Northern Ireland businesses.
Yes.
So where the funding comes from, what programmes are used to support it, I think the big picture piece is that we have moved significantly. I don't mean invest. Companies have moved significantly in terms of their uptake of innovation and R&D, and there are funding streams there to support them to do that.
Okay, gentlemen, you're going to have to excuse me. I'm on call for Balmoral here, and I'm going to call upon the Vice Chairman to take over now. Okay, thanks very much indeed for your presentation, and hopefully we'll see you again anyway.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning at 12. Okay.
I have a few questions.
Richard, you're up here. From the village.
Well, first of all, I want to join with Gordon and congratulating you. You know, I mean, for me, I see evidence of cultural change as well as success, and I think obviously those increasing evidence just of some economic recovery here certainly helps. But I think in the adverse years that we've had recently, it was clear that there was some significant change being wrought within InvestNI. And I think that that bodes well for perhaps a more cooperative working relationship than we've had in the past. Because I do think that Invest were being asked to defend circumstances and outcomes in terms of the economy and employment that really was beyond your ability, as we've seen internationally in any event. I'm interested, and you will know this just from earlier conversations, I'm interested in just kind of closing the gap between the perception people have in relation to jobs that are promoted and outcomes, and as good as your word, you're kind of moving in that direction. You're talking about a 7-year span to establish the benchmarks in which we can then kind of compare the performance of the economy, and indeed yourselves as our main kind of agencies we rely on to track those changes and to change those circumstances. Does that mean that you are now in a position to kind of produce, reports that are updated and refreshed on a quarterly basis if necessary?
Yeah.
And that will reflect, we've an issue that it's very difficult to kind of tie down what are the circumstances, and one of the factors in terms of, say, location was mentioned here today, and it's not the only one, obviously, is grid connection charges. There's others such as the infrastructure and access and communications generally. Skills, I suppose the metropolitan pull, insofar as we have a metropolitan centre here in this economy, then Belfast is clearly it. Does that data set in which we'll be going forward from now on reflect the ability to measure, for instance, where we've referred to PSM, and I just want to take that as an example. In this economy, is PSM actually slipping as it gone downwards?
No, it's marginally going up. It's now about £19,000.
And how does it compare with similar benchmarks, say, in the southern economy and then in the wider UK economy?
Well, it's a fair bit behind the UK average. I can't remember. I think it's mid-20, 25, 26, somewhere in that region in the rest of the UK.
But it's very relative for people just to understand that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although again, you've got to be careful because that takes in London.
Yeah.
Excuse me, at 25.
Distortion.
So so if we actually exclude London, then I think the number, and I can't remember what the number is, but it's much different.
Yeah. So it still is the benchmark by which a lot of our targets and goals are set in terms of the quality. But in terms of the data set that is there, we are able to analyse that data set by the segments and sectors that we have within our environment here. So we'll be able to break it down by the 11 council areas. We'll be able to break it down by external jobs and local jobs to give visibility of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, in terms of, as I said, the metropolitan effect, there is higher costs involved in Belfast than there would be with some other locations. Whether or not that is a factor in location choice has to be set against other things, such as the connection charges and whatever. So people will have expectations that perhaps aren't rooted in clear, kind of verifiable, evidence-based factors, and I think that the sooner we get to that, there's a good word in one of those slides, 14, about meaningless in the context of how long typically it takes to kind of, from early contacts, signing the contracts, and then delivering.
The two data sets are meaningful in their own way. It's comparing the same data from 2 years creates a meaning.
No, I absolutely accept what you're saying there, and that's why I'm so positive about the fact that that you are now bringing us to the point.
Yeah.
And I mean, once we have an acceptable benchmark, then I mean we can go into and come out of mandates on the basis of we have a target that was actually based on clearly. And very coherent kind of targets that reflected the data that was there. Doesn't change. That's the starting point, and this is what we've done over the period of a mandate. That I welcome. But whenever we set targets for redressing, and there's a lot of history involved in this, regional disparity goes back a long way. There are factors that will impact on your ability as an agency, amongst other agencies and departments, in addressing those disparities. I think that we do need to know what are the factors that would get in the way of you making your contribution to regional disparity, or in fact maybe your inability to make progress on that particular target, because it might be factors that some other department has to address.
Yeah. And I think I know we had this conversation this time last year on a slightly different level around what we can do to be more proactive in terms of engaging with councils, particularly around Northern Ireland. And I can report today that has moved on considerably, in that we now have met with all of the chief executives of the new council areas and had a very positive discussion around our engagement as a partner around the table in the development of those community plans, because we see the community plan element of those new councils and the development of those community plans as a critical part of us all working together to build a plan, just in the same way as the One Plan was built for Derry and the Belfast Investment Plan was built. I think those are the forerunners of what can be developed as stakeholders all around the table in the development of a sub-regional economic development plan, which I've said before, I'll repeat today, I am absolutely committed to being part of.
Yeah, and I mean that reference to meaningful information. I mean, when I look at slide 4, I don't find it particularly meaningful. It doesn't tell me, what was the benchmark in terms of the overall jobs that were spilled out of the economy during what was a recession, and clearly there was impacts there, and we would need to know that. I mean, how many jobs coming out of the pipeline, and you're in a position to tell us. So jobs that weren't here this time last year are here now. But you could also tell us how many jobs were here last year that aren't here now. And you need to really track that as well to get your head around this conundrum.
We're now in a good position and we can do both of those. So and again, maybe I'll recap a little bit. What we have now committed to do is at this point every year, you can request this anytime you want, but at this point every year, give you the data for the previous years for job promoted. I wouldn't want this committee to get too far away from a job promoted number. From a sales operation, you still need to know what has been committed to during the year. I know there's always this concern in people's head, will they not all turn into jobs? Well, time will tell, and we now have the analysis to tell how many of the 10,800 this year in 4, 5, 6 years' time actually get delivered. And I have no difficulty, we'll measure that and analyse it. But you still need that lead indicator to know whether you're going up or going down in terms of the pipeline that's going forward. The second piece is what we committed to do last year, and we will do it at the half-year point, is we will present to you the net change of employment, which is the point you make, within our account managed base of 1,100 companies, which will give you a very good indicator of what the net position is. So we now have those two systems up and running. Jobs created analysis on a case-by-case basis, net employment change for the 1,100 account managed customers. That is done by survey and analysis, and that information will be presented to you at the half-year point.
I mean, my sense of it, and I have some frustration about this, is that people can work with that data. They see the common sense of it. It takes a while to kind of promote and develop a potential investment. It takes time to kind of negotiate your way through the various kind of funding mechanisms and structures to get to decision point. It certainly then takes set-up time, recruitment, etc., before we see and perhaps reaching the full level of the expected development of that particular investment.
If it's helpful, I think it was in 2011-12 we were 76% of the offers we made in that year, 76% of the offers made have now been taken up, and we would expect that number obviously to gain, because you get the bulk of it maybe in the first 3 years of the thing, but as it goes out, and that's why there's the 7-year period, because ultimately that's the complete length of time, a letter of offer and everything else.
But you see, if I were to look at slide 4, Mark, I mean, I would nearly have to do a bit of research to go back to what information were we given last year. What has been what does the graph tell us about the performance of the economy, so that 76% becomes meaningful, because that means that it came off a low benchmark. So 76% was an improvement, but it was because there was a dip maybe the year before. That information, I think, is in your possession, and I don't think we're being given the opportunity to judge the consistent performance. And I'm convinced it is a consistent performance, but I don't think you're serving your own cause well, because you don't tell people what in fact is the comparative information that's relevant.
It's difficult to know what to bring, because time is limited, but in slide 11 you can see 3 years of performance against that at the very top. So in year 1 it was 5,700, in year 2 it was 7,200, and this year it's 10,800. So you can see 3 years of performance against that job created position. Albeit that does not factor in your point for how has the economy changed across that period.
I mean, I think what you're moving towards, and I'm sure your statisticians have their head around this, where if you establish an agreed benchmark, and it is just the starting point, but that becomes very meaningful whenever you're reporting regularly, whether it's quarterly or whatever. And that's what you're interested in, is the change from the last quarter, because you're familiar with the position that there was, and we know what the benchmark was. So the economy is either, we're creating more jobs, more well-paid jobs, or in fact the salary levels are going down, the numbers of jobs that are being created are going down. We know that we could work out the relationship between jobs promoted and jobs delivered. You know, people understand that. Unemployed young people apply for every job that's going. They don't expect to get every job. You know, they understand that it is it's a competition out there and it's a very tough world. I think we can handle all that information if we're given the opportunity, and I think the wider kind of community would understand better. You know, does a regional disparity target mean anything to them? You know, what I've discovered is that in Derry, people think everything goes to Belfast. When I step outside of Derry, people think everything goes to Belfast and Derry. You know, so it's all relative. You have to try and you need to give people information that is robust, it's evidence-based, and they can make their own minds up based on that rather than their perceptions or their prejudice, depending on their point of view. And I think that what you're doing now really can, you know, fairly quickly get to the heart of that, both informed programme for government targets that are realistic for yourselves, and we'll know whether in fact you deserve the bonuses again that we've taken away from you or not, you know, the case may be.
Let's not get into that one.
I think no, we're not going to get into it really, but I think that, you know, if we look at slide 4, to me, you know, you needn't bother producing that, you know, because it doesn't actually help me, it doesn't inform me at all, because I don't know what your benchmark was, I don't know what the comparison is with this time last year, unless I go off and do the work of recreating the information that you have yourselves already.
Okay.
Rhetorical question.
That wasn't a question, it was a rant.
We're working that out.
Tommy?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation. Just a couple of things I would like to say. First of all, I'd like to agree with my colleague Gordon. Commend you for your success so far. And for me, that this is a good news story on these papers. And even this past number of weeks, there's something like 3,000 jobs that have been announced. Good news. And God knows we need good news stories in Northern Ireland. But could I just bring you back to a couple of things? Mark, I think you had mentioned about the £1 billion of investment. My frustration is this, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think to myself, it's the first time I've heard this. Why are we not shouting this from the rooftops? I understand problems about getting good news stories in the media, but I mean, for me, this is a milestone. This is something that we should be celebrating.
Well, after this, in fact, at 2 o'clock, we hope to be shouting at the rooftops, because we've got and we're not allowed to shout it before. We've been obviously explain everything to yourselves, but you're right, and it sometimes is frustrating because there was one of the most frustrating things for me is the success of our local companies doesn't get the same carry in the press as, and even an FDI type, an inward investor always attracts for whatever reason, and it'll be a point I'll be making this afternoon. We need it's important that there's a responsibility with all those reporting things like this, that they get the balance, and then and let people understand how successful our local businesses have been, and they've been fantastic in terms of the amount of R&D and that investment you're referring to. A large part of that is also our local companies.
And again, even this week with the Right Bus in terms of their investment as well. Great to see them during the Giro d'Italia up here, and their buses here, they're in Japan, London, all over the place. The second thing, it's an area that I would have a major interest in would be social enterprises. And so could I ask you, let me give you an example. There's a social enterprise in East Belfast, East Belfast Partnership. They have made contact with a company I think it's called Carl Strauss in San Diego, and the potential of investment. This is actually look up on the internet to get some figures here. What can they expect from Invest Northern Ireland in terms of trying to bring investment into the Hollywood Arches, as an example? But great news for us.
Well, they can expect all of the support that we give to inward investors, whether that's in San Diego, whether that's support from the international team that are there, a sizable team now and based in San Francisco, or whether it's the other support that we can give. So if the company's going to come and invest and create jobs, then they'll be able to get access to funding and support around that. And
so all I'm asking them, will they be treated like any other business then?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
As a business then?
Yes. So the full range of support that we can offer offer everything from job to property solutions into R&D. All of those, that whole range of support's available to them, irrespective of whether they're a social enterprise or a limited company.
And just when I finish, I think most of the questions I was going to look at have been asked. The Chair mentioned earlier on about access to MLAs, and he commended you for that. I would say the same. The interaction I've had with your staff has been excellent. And,
thank you.
And in the midst of us, it's good that you're getting the accommodation this morning. And I gave it 2 o'clock today, or 12 o'clock, or 2 o'clock today, Mark. But the staff have been excellent any time that I have contacted them. So just want to
appreciate
that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you can rest assured that on Tuesday, that was the message that we delivered to them in terms of the work that they've done this year.
Honestly, you mentioned there that everybody's going to be treated the same, but I'm just interested in social enterprises, given that their support's kind of moving to the local authorities. Will they be one step removed from the support that's on offer, or how's that going to work?
Just in terms of the point that was been made, the potential partner of the social economy that will get the same access to support as any other inward investor. The very specific question you asked, will they be one step removed? Yes. So the delivery for start-up business and the delivery for social enterprises will transfer to the councils. But our ambition is to continue to build that very strong relationship with the councils, so that we're there to help and to support. The local enterprise development funding, which has been a big part of funding for programmes at a council level over the last couple of years, that will continue, and we have committed to continue to part fund council activities. Even though we're transferring the responsibility, we will continue to part fund council activities through that LED funding.
Well, thank you, Chair. And this is probably leading on a bit from what you're talking about, but obviously the top 2 priorities in the programme for government are growing the economy and then tackling disadvantage and promoting health and well-being. And for me, the main instrument in that is actually jobs and getting people acquainted with work and generally lifting wages and spirits and health, etc., etc. So, and I heard what you said earlier on about enhancements in terms of inward investment for if people are going to specific areas. But what strategically is being done to ensure that those areas that are most disadvantaged are actually going to get targeted in terms of jobs promotion? I appreciate you're operating from a strategic across Northern Ireland perspective, and that you're grateful for jobs coming in, but is there a strategic targeting system going on whereby those areas that are most disadvantaged will get at least attention, if not priority?
Well, there's 3 aspects to that. One is whether strategic or operational, our absolute focus, and I hope you see it, and I hope you see it in delivery, our absolute focus is to deliver the targets that are set by this Assembly in the programme for government. And then at a secondary level, to deliver those targets that sit below that in the executive strategy, again, which is supported and endorsed in this Assembly. So that is our primary focus. And in terms of the scorecard and the key targets that are in there, against all of those executive strategy and programme for government targets, that is what we spend our time focusing our efforts and driving to make sure that we deliver. I think at a secondary level then, even though, and we've had the debates about sub-regional targets, and I don't want to reopen that again unnecessarily, but at a secondary level, for all the reasons that I have explained before, I still would be in the position that I think to take all of those high-level targets and then to divide them up either 26 ways or 18 ways or 11 ways, depending on your outlook in life, gets you into a law of diminishing returns in terms of, splitting down very fine targets into sub-regional areas. I think the third point I would make is, and has been often repeated, that whenever you use the word target, we have a challenge and enough job to do on some occasions in trying to fight our way amongst 200 other economic development agencies across the world, trying to attract firms to come to a population area of 1.8 million people. We will not get into a situation of saying to people, you must go here and you must go there. In a commercial world, we cannot force companies to go to somewhere where they don't want to go. What we can do is we can encourage and incentivise them. The Vice Chair, Deputy Chair has already mentioned a little bit around the incentive factor earlier on, where we had a higher level of support outside of Belfast and in, and we've used that to its maximum. The second piece is knowing the proposition for each of those sub-regions, and that's what we've tried to do in 3 or 4 areas. I'm now committing to do it in all 11 council areas through the community plan. Work with us, tell us what your USPs are. We'll build that into a proposition and we'll go out and promote it for this area. And I think some of the really good council areas, and Derry City Council have been very proactive in this, in terms of maximising, for example, the Clipper event that they run around the world, making sure that in each of the ports of call where we have an office or we have a presence, that we do combined events and we present and promote the area that attraction comes from, in this case from the northwest. So it's much more around those areas that we're driving, trying to engage on the sub-regional agenda.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm not promoting you to First Minister level or anything like it, but these are targets in the programme for government, and you can help in relation to them. A rising tide in this case will not float all boats, because it'll be left up to councils who may or may not have the capacity or the ability or the ambition or whatever. So, in other words, if there isn't a strategic approach to this, we will be looking back in 5 or 10 years at another generation in particular areas who will have found themselves left behind.
Let me be very clear. I have given a commitment to all of the councils, and it's been delivered to all of the chief executives, that we will not be walking away in 12 months' time in terms of those responsibilities. It is our absolute priority to ensure that the absolute transfer of functions happens as smoothly as we can. But I have made it clear to councils that for whatever period of time it takes, if they can't ramp up quickly enough or they can't get the right people to take on these functions, that we will continue to do a job on their behalf on the ground until they start to ramp that up. It's incumbent on us, on behalf of the whole of the executive, to make sure that happens. So we'll not be waiting to one fine day and handing a set of books over and say, that's us, we're out of here. The second point is, I think we've shown by the commitment to continue to fund where we didn't need to, continue to fund those local economic development programmes, that tries to build a partnership with the councils in terms of making that happen. And the third point is, it's important for all of us, because this is not two distinctly separate parts that are not connected. The small businesses of today will be the big businesses of tomorrow. So in the new model, where councils will take that local economic development function, I want to find the right buses and the Almacs of tomorrow that'll start off as small family businesses and will work their way up to being within our account managed base, where we can then give the full suite of programme support around it. So it's incumbent on us all to make sure we continue to do that.
And there is another issue, because, like colleagues, I sit on the Health Committee, and we're seeing an ever expanding budget, ever increasing pressure, but the Health Department can't fund the creation of jobs, but your function and DETI can. Yeah. And that is where, in my view, focus should be, and a strengthened focus.
I sit on the committee. I sit on the Task and Finish group, and I sit on the Transform Your Care team, and I'm sitting on another one now. And health can actually deliver jobs. I mean, that's what we were trying to show. That we have a $4.5 billion spend in the healthcare, and we can actually use that if we combine the resources, as you're talking about. As we combine them, we both can actually benefit from a budget as to where that's sourced to promote businesses in Northern Ireland. And the social enterprise one is a very, very, very good case. And it's going to take the executive to make changes to make that work. For instance, you know, in our effort to save money, we combine all the gardening maintenance estates of the hospital groups, etc., within Northern Ireland. That effectively ruled out a large number of social enterprise companies, because combine it all, brings it into a European contract, then you have balance sheets, then you have everything else. And we actually took it away from people who had a stake in our Northern Ireland and give it to other companies because of the way we did our procurement process. So it takes everything to work to what you're talking about. The strategy is right, but it has to be everybody inputting into it. And that was a very stark example to me when I went out to look at the Collin community, and I saw, you know, a local company was basically pushed aside in favour of a larger corporate because of the way that procurement policy works. So we all need to, you know, keep in mind, whenever it may sound right initially, but what are the consequences to businesses in Northern Ireland if we go down a particular route? So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sydney?
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Alistair and Mark, for coming along today. And certainly can I concur with my colleagues in relation to offering the congratulations for the report. It certainly argues well for the future, and I say I wish you well and wish you best well. I do maybe detect a little bit there on our Alistair in saying that maybe the next few months may not just be as good as what we've had, but we've had tremendous results on job creation and announcements over the last few weeks, and I suppose to keep going at that rate would to be really expecting maybe too much, but we can still keep our foot in the pedal and certainly try and get as many jobs as possible. Can I just touch on a slide, I think slide 9 here, about the driving satisfaction? And I think I don't have the coloured one to talk about here, but maybe you could expand a bit on that it's 80% customer satisfaction, that's what you're saying. And there's 20% there. I'm just trying to maybe touch on where do we find that dissatisfaction, or in that 20%, or what is the reason for it?
Okay. So the numbers are 80% satisfied, 5 dissatisfied. The 15 then is the balance sits in the middle, and they categorise themselves as neither. But if you want to wrap the neithers and the dissat together, you're getting 20%. I suppose the highlights for us are the bit that has driven this satisfaction, and no surprise to you, is the point of contact within the organisation. Time and time again, you have heard, we have heard, that the relationship and the success that firms have with Invest Northern Ireland is dependent on their client executive, client manager, and the support proactivity of that individual. And I'll tell you a little bit then what we're doing. Knowing that, we have just introduced the Business Development Academy. It's a major investment for us to support and train, further train, because we all need to continuously improve our performance. So therefore, the Business Development Academy has been launched. All 300 of our client-facing staff have to date gone through an assessment. So we've built the competencies for each of those roles in the framework. We have assessed all of those staff against those competencies, and therefore where there's gaps in that competency, we have built a business development framework around that, where they will either have online or face-to-face training and coaching to continue to move that. That's the way we will continue to drive this up. On the dissatisfaction side, the key message that comes back to us is bureaucracy and paperwork. And there's a certain amount we can do on that, and we are trying to move that forward. But, and I don't make this as any way of an excuse, a lot of the bureaucracy is inherited. So we had a really good debate earlier on about European funding. The pain that comes with European funding is a higher level of paperwork and process that is required to go back through the European mechanisms to make that work. Some of our programmes, to be frank, we've had to take out of European funding, particularly on the training side, because firms got to a point of saying, the paperwork that I have to put in to get this support is not worth what I get out of it. So we've taken out of European funding and put it into baseline funding, where the processes we can move much more quickly. So it is around that. And the other big piece we're doing is we've now invested heavily to put into place a much more automated system. On the back of the investment we've made for the jobs created, we're trying to develop an online system where firms can submit their letter of offer online, the template letters of offer. They'll be able to submit their letter of offer online, and then the whole way through the process they'll be able to make a claim online. They'll be able to track their claim so that they know where it is in the process, so that a lot of the paperwork piece of this will come out. And obviously then, as you would expect in some of the best in case online systems, they will not have to rekey data. So if they've applied for us 6 months ago for a piece of marketing support, and they come forward for an innovation piece of support, because it's on an intranet basis, all of their data then populates across into that new application process, so they don't have to rekey it. And that's what we're trying to do, to try and minimise the pain and the bureaucracy as they see it that comes around that. But there are elements of it we will not be able to remove, but we're on a programme to try and do as much as we can.
Would it be then, Alistair, that the smaller firms, you probably find that the people who run the firms are the owner of the firms,
yes,
and
right.
They haven't time for all this bureaucracy and paperwork, and you've touched on, I'm pleased that maybe you're trying to take that out of the system. Those are things that I hear that you say, well, what's the effort here? I haven't time to do that, and I haven't time to employ or pay staff to do that because they're working in maybe small margins or things to try and build their business. But I'm pleased that maybe our delving into that to try and help those businesses.
But as always, what we try to balance here is the paperwork that we need to do the job, make an assessment around the project, value for money, all of that, and then what is needed to fuel the system of reporting. And again, we've talked about jobs created here today, and again, we try to find a balance in that. There are sometimes we will say to you that we cannot measure and analyse that. And a prime example was that a number of years ago, another committee in this place asked for tracking and analysis of where people lived and where they travelled to work. Now, quite apart from data protection issues around that, the bureaucracy of implementing that into firms and asking them to tell us, and thinking about people move house, they have to fill in the forms again and all the rest of it. That was a clear example where our view and our advice back was, if you implement a system like that, you will only compound this issue around data analysis. There's always a balance to be struck. Not all of our data is for assessment of project. A lot of it is for tracking and visibility to give you the reporting that you need.
We've talked about earlier on about local government reform and the work. Is there a role for local government then maybe to help in this situation? I chaired in my time in council the Economic Development Department and talking to a lot of business, but is there a role going forward for the new councils to say maybe to help in this role for the smaller businesses can get that help from the local council and also feed yourselves feeding in to that role?
Absolutely, and that's clearly what is envisaged and planned around the changes that will take place inside the next 12 months, and all of that transfer of function for small business development, start-up business, social economy, all of that transfer into the councils. So yes.
And to just speak again about the councils, you talk about maybe putting a presence in all the council areas.
Yes.
Are you working sort of at arm's length at the minute? Or do you intend to get in there quickly?
No.
Because things are moving quickly.
No, I know, and I must say we have been welcomed with open arms by the new council chief executives. There's no resistance whatsoever in terms of starting to make that piece work. So we are absolutely in there at the minute.
There is a great need to get in there.
Absolutely, and we have already presented papers to them around that local economic development funding piece and around how the Business Start programme could work. We've already presented those papers to the chief executives, and we're starting to make progress in that.
Yeah, I think that's crucial because, I say, as we move forward with the new council arrangements, it's crucial that the like of Invest and others get in there and support them greatly, because there will be big changes here, and we all know that, but through ourselves as politicians, I think the opportunities are there, and with everyone working together, I think it argues well for the future. But I'll not labour any more today.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done. And report. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
David?
Feature. Thank you very much for the information so far. And I'll come back to Sydney was raising the issue of customer satisfaction. It's certainly to be welcomed that the satisfaction's up, the satisfaction's down. How's that measured?
So there's for that actual number, that's done in an annual survey. So that is our account managed base, 1,100 customers. Round about from memory, I think 500 are in the analysis that is done at the end of the year, and the questionnaire covers the full range of support. So it's everything from your point of contact, if you've had support, if you've made a claim, if you've had to phone in, the full range of support right across the board. And what we measure is, we measure familiarity, we measure advocacy, and then we measure the individual areas within the support that we offer. In addition to that, we have now started, we haven't a target for it yet because we've just run it for this year to see what it looks like. It will be in our scorecard for next year, or this year we're now in, for the rest of the business population. So the account managed 1,100, we're now have a survey out there for the rest of the business community as well. And it's running about 80-odd%, so again, it's very healthy at the minute. The third thing we do is we measure what we call event-driven surveys. So if somebody gets a letter of offer from us during the year, on a quarterly basis, they are put into a pool that then tests how satisfied they were with that process. So it's just around the engagement and the letter of offer, and that's done on a quarterly basis. So with 3 measures really across that.
Okay, how does that compare to what you did in 2008 when the satisfaction levels were 21%, I think you said.
How does what
The
compare?
process compare?
The same.
It's the same.
No,
It's apples and apples. and that's the
Well,
question.
just one caveat to be fair. The step between 2011 and 2013, to be fair, had a change of the base. So whenever we came here and presented the reorganisation of Invest Northern Ireland, the resegmentation, we took our account managed base from about 2,000 down to 1,100. So I would acknowledge that there's probably a portion of that move at that time that could be accounted for in the change of the base that's in there. For me, the encouraging point this year is with a static base between 13 and 14, we have continued to move up.
Okay. Yeah, because you point out
There's a
that
step
it's a step change,
Yeah.
and if there's a change in process, then it's
But I think there's a point in that, and we have done this analysis. The feedback from companies is the more programs that they get involved in with us, the higher their level of satisfaction. And what you would find between the 2,000 and the 1,100 are more the active customers that we would engage with.
And the year gap we have here goes 2011 to 13. There's no 2012. Is that because of the change in?
That's because there's a typo in that slide.
Okay, so I'll not delve too much into that.
No, those are 5 consistent years of performance. So I amend my comment earlier on whenever I said 2008. I just went to the left of the slide and took one off. As 2007 would be our 59 and 21.
Okay.
I'll spot it.
R&D and export, two separate areas, but when we did a presentation from Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce, they were critical in both areas of the level of duplication and overlap in public support. Now, you're only responsible for your element of that. But I did ask specifically the representatives from Solmatix, well, when you go to Invest NI, do they at least point out that all these other supports are out there? And his experience was no, that you don't. I suppose 2 questions to that. What is your view of how we promote both R&D and export in Northern Ireland? Do you believe there's enough joined up working? And if not, how do we get there? And 2, do you accept the comment that Invest NI is not signposting?
On the latter point, I don't accept it. With the introduction of the Boosting Business programme, and particularly our business support team, where we've taken 14,000 calls from companies over the last 12 months, the key objective of that team was to signpost people, not only to our own programmes, but to other programmes. And as we sit here today, they now have got over 70 other programmes that they are trained on and know about that they can signpost companies to, across other government departments and other business support organisations, including, I must say, the Chamber of Commerce. And I'll not go too far with my criticism of some of the comments that were made that day, and I did watch and listen to it afterwards. All I would say is that there is a difference that is emerging because the Chambers of Commerce in GB and worldwide are taking a slightly different role than the Chamber of Commerce has taken in Northern Ireland, and they probably look to that model to see commercially from there, because the Chamber of Commerce is a commercial organisation. Is there a role for them to get involved in some of the work that we do? And we've discussed that with them, but we haven't moved to that point. So that might flavour a little bit some of the comments that were made that day on behalf of the Chamber. Having said that, we work very cooperatively with them on the development of the programmes that we're involved in. On the R&D side, so that's just generally around signposting. On the R&D side, the vast majority of the R&D support is delivered by Invest Northern Ireland, so there's not a lot of, apart from the Horizon 2020 stuff, which I think we've well covered, there's not a lot of other R&D support around, so I don't know that there's that much of a challenge around that. I would acknowledge that there are lots of players in the export support side. So whether you go to the banks who are now raising their profile, obviously they have a commercial interest in trying to promote their credit insurance and export insurance and all the rest of it. They're now promoting it very heavily. The Chamber are promoting themselves, and they do a real job on the export side in terms of the export licensing and the paperwork around that. Or whether you then go into Intertrade Ireland and some of the other bodies that are involved in that. So on the export side, and we've well covered the question earlier from Mrs. Overend around what we're trying to do, There is a piece of work for us to make sure that on the export side we've got all of those dots joined up. So I wouldn't take all of the points that were made that day, and I won't go into the blow by blow. I think there's a lot of things, and I know the particular reference was made between what we're doing north and what we're doing south. I would repeat to you, and I've said this before whenever we launched Boosting Business, the level of support that we give to businesses in Northern Ireland is far higher than the level of support that is given to businesses in the Republic of Ireland. Factually, for exports. And I'll give you a few examples. Through Boosting Business, we introduced support for return visits after people went on a trade mission. Criticism was, you take me on a trade mission, next trade mission doesn't go back for 12 months, I want to go back in 3 to follow up. You don't fund that. We now fund that. Second piece is we fund translation services for firms, and we fund legal services for firms. And a lot of the small businesses in the Republic of Ireland, that will not be funded by Enterprise Ireland. The third area we fund is Solex exhibitions. So let me explain that. There are certain exhibitions during the year, and this committee actually, and I should have referenced it earlier on, members of this committee will see firsthand in a few weeks' time what one of those exhibitions is like, the bio exhibition, and I think there's 4 or 5 members of this committee going to go there. Those are exhibitions we take a stand at and companies go to it. But there are other exhibitions during the year that we don't have an Invest Northern Ireland presence, and we would not have funded firms in the past to go to it. We now will fund them to go to those exhibitions. And the last point is, we used to take firms on trade missions, say to India, to Bangalore, and a firm said, well, actually, I want to go to Chennai. You're not going there. Will you fund me to go? In the past, we would have said no. Today, we will fund that visit. So the range of support for exporters in Northern Ireland is, and you can probably tell from my response to it, I take exception to the fact that people say we don't offer as high a level of support in Northern Ireland.
Okay, it's certainly a robust response. To be fair, my recollection of that was not that there was a huge criticism of Invest NI, but the structures of how we deliver export across Northern Ireland public sector, and you're not responsible for that, although obviously you're a key player in it. My question is more, if there, and I think you said there are over 70 programmes there, and lies possibly the problem. Great that you're able to signpost it and your staff are trained on it, but they shouldn't have to know 70 different programmes, because it shouldn't. Maybe there's need for it, but certainly our evidence was there wasn't need for that widespread number. How do we pool those resources and make it easier for business to access? Because the evidence from Somatics was, I can't list all the supports that are available because I don't have the time, will, or energy. And in fact, when we go to, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, because we've done recollection, when we go to look for these things, it's just a minefield. Right. That's not good. That's a customer experience, not necessarily your customer, but the customer of sort of Northern Ireland PLC.
Yeah, and I'll not get into a direct response to that individual company. I'm disappointed with the comments that were made, because Somatics as a firm has derived a lot of support over the years.
I think they acknowledge that, but
let's be clear. We are never going to be able to rationalise all of those programmes from where they come from. Our responsibility is to get into firms and understand what their challenges and their opportunities are. And this is what we're trying to do through the Business Development Academy. I don't want to give you, I don't want to stand here today or sit here today and give you such a defence that we are perfect. We are not. There's a lot more we can do.
I want to kind of move it away from Invest NI and what you deliver.
No, but people want a list.
Influence.
I think this is the point. People want a list. If I've been asked once, I've been asked 100 times. Give me a list of all the programmes and I'll fish through them and work out the ones that I want. That is not the best way to deliver economic benefit, because we'll end up spending all of our time saying, well, actually, I don't think that one's right for you and this one's right for you, because if you take those two and you add them together, you've got a better answer than that one. That's our challenge, to have the right people with the right knowledge that can take all of those solutions and add them together to deliver the best benefit for the company. If we do it right, that's great. If sometimes we haven't done it right, then we've room for improvement. But it is not a shopping list. It is about the expertise we can add.
You said we can't rationalise them all, and I certainly don't believe it's Invest NI's job to do so. But if the majority of those 70 programmes are publicly funded, in your work with DEDI and other support organisations, should you not all be working together and say, how can we consolidate those funds to make access easier for business, to make it more efficient, and to get rid of some of the overlap and duplication, if it exists?
Well, look, I'll give you a flip side to that. I acknowledge we have actually contributed over the last 2 years to the support of more programmes out there. And this is the balance between local government and central government. So the local economic development measure was put together to allow the council areas, sub-regional council areas, to build programmes that either do one or two things. One, are more attuned to their sub-region as a customised programme, or allow them to differentiate a little bit in the support that they give. So through the LED measure, quite a few of those 70 have been developed with our funding and our support. And if you were to go out today and say, well, actually I can't remember how many there are, probably 30, 40 LED programmes that are out there. Actually, we want one size fits all for all the councils. It's not going to be the most effective way to actually make that happen. The challenge is on us to know what those are, as I said earlier, and ensure that whenever we're talking to the people, we know what they are, and we can pick from a toolkit of services and put a solution together that's the best for them.
Okay, one final question on this. I think you did acknowledge there was maybe some overlap and duplication. Is that correct?
Overlap in...
And duplication in support for export.
There is, yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
So, okay then.
Well,
how do we put
well, you look at there's overlap and duplication. To stick with the chamber, not out of any desire to get to that point, but there are services the chamber will deliver to firms that we can deliver to firms. And to stick with that example, what we need to do is that's a waste of effort. What we need to do is to decide, are there elements of work that we could have a third party deliver on our behalf, and we step out of that space and focus on another. But then you're into a procurement piece.
Legislatively, and is there any barriers to you pulling, say you have a fund, they have a fund, and they're both trying to do the same thing, you saying let's work together, let's put a little...
None at all, provided that there's not a duplication of European funding and that you can't double fund.
Okay.
There's no barriers to that.
Okay, Chair, if I can just ask one brief question on corporation tax, but I'll leave the export for now.
Your question? No.
Sorry?
That's not your question.
No, that's my question to you, if you're content to give me the courtesy. Corporation tax, obviously, I do not doubt for a second in terms of what Invest NI does. A reduction in corporation tax would certainly help you. Our job is to see, will it help the overall Northern Ireland economy? We get corporation tax revolved and reduce it. Do you believe, would you stand over it, that actually in terms of net jobs, Northern Ireland would be better off? And are we talking short, medium or long term?
No, I mean, the benefit of corporation tax for us is the fact that we can fish in another pool. At the minute, all the jobs, well, not all the jobs, but the majority of jobs coming to Northern Ireland are done on skills and cost. That's the basis. People come here, they see a great skill set and they see a low cost opportunity to develop that. If we bring the tax rate and we're able to bring it down to the 10-12% level, we have an opportunity to bring profitable businesses in. I have no doubt at all, that that will lead to a net increase of jobs in Northern Ireland. Completely convinced of that fact. Because
over what kind of time period? Because I mean, well, we've heard that the payback is maybe 20 years, and I think that was the Economic Advisory Group.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of economists out there with a lot of different answers. I wouldn't be the one that like to pick between them. I think, to be honest, somewhere between 5 and 20 is probably right. What it is, I don't know. I think the important thing is what you'll do is once there's a clear signal from our assembly, our government, that we have that capability and it is our intent to do, then you will get corporations engaged. Whether it's introduced immediately or whether it's introduced over a phased period, I think it's actually irrelevant. I think companies that are looking at it want to do it for a longer term because they want to base themselves here to take advantages of it. And if we say over a 3-year period we're going to take it down from 20-something% down to 10%, they'll work it on the basis of where it's going to be. And therefore, my own personal view would be a phased approach would be a correct one and minimise the cost to the Northern Ireland purse, but it also gives us the maximum opportunity to exploit that potential. And we will exploit it from day one. We will be out there selling it from day one.
And would you have a concern if we take in, again, there's been various figures bandied about, but anywhere between 200 million to 400 million out of our block grant, that wouldn't have an impact on those good skills that you say that people are coming here for? Because at the end of the day, they have to be funded.
Yeah, I mean, how you manage that funding, I think will be a net gain, but how you manage that funding is up to ourselves and up to how we negotiate with the Treasury. I mean, some of the Treasury numbers I would completely disagree with, and they're obviously done from a particular bias. Our numbers are done from the opposite side, if you like, of that particular argument. I think ours are actually more realistically based on actual fact, but I think either way, it's going to be a good call, a very good call for Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Gentlemen, thanks very much. You've nothing to add, no?
I think
Thank
that's it,
you.
right?
Thanks very
We'll
much.
let you out before your 2 o'clock.
Good job.
That's almost as long a pipeline as some of the jobs that we've done.
All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, see you in June. Members, agenda item 5, matters arising.
Right, Chair, before we move on, we just heard evidence there that that Daddy received these papers in plenty of time and we didn't. Can we write to Daddy and say why not? What was the delay in you receiving them and us receiving them?
No, that's no problem. We'll have to seek clarity on that. Members agreed?
Yep.
Agenda item 5, matters arising, at page 67 in your packs is the business case for the committee's participation in the trade mission with Invest NI to California. Delegation is to visit a major life sciences exhibition in San Diego, which is one of the world's major biotech and pharmaceutical exhibition. Also now included in your packs in the business case is committee participation in events in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Members content with the scheduled itinerary?
Chair, could I just raise one point? I spoke to the chair earlier on about this. I noticed that the delegation is going to San Diego on the Monday, is that right? But they're flying to San Diego. Be honest, see if I had been on this, but I would have certainly been pushing to have a day in San Diego because there's so much because you're only going to get a couple of hours there. So is it possible you could even include an extra day? I'm not going, but I would say it'd be very important to try and do something in San Diego. Never mind just going to this conference. I know this is important, isn't it? So say if you left on a Saturday or a Sunday, you could actually spend the full day in San Diego.
As someone who has done that trail over the years in the past, I would completely support what Sammy's saying. You need to give yourselves enough time to do.
Would members be content then for me to contact the individual members who are scheduled to go, and if they're content with that approach to change the business case to include that?
Yeah, and I think I said it at the last meeting, Jim, that when I was on the Dell, they did a whole lot of research, and we had actually planned to go to San Diego, and then took a new life on.
It is just one additional night, so it shouldn't have a huge impact on the overall.
Yeah.
You happy enough travelling to Sunday, Gordon?
Yes, I suppose.
Leave it with you, Jim, that's all.
Offer it up.
Happy enough with the itinerary with those
Yes, very good.
proposed changes?
Yes, and best of luck.
The committee previously considered requesting an oral briefing from the Department of Finance and Personnel on their Office of State Energy Efficiency and Carbon Reduction Plan and the latest public sector energy consumption report. We agreed to check with the Committee for Finance and Personnel to see if they were currently carrying out any work on this matter. The clerk to the Committee for Finance and Personnel has informed Jim that his committee will receive a briefing from the Department for Finance and Personnel on the issue on Wednesday the 28th of May. And has offered to send members of this committee any papers received as well as the Hansard of the briefing. So, members suggested rather than duplicating the session by us hearing from them as well, are members content to forward any questions they may have to the clerk, who will then pass them on for the attention of members of the Committee for Finance and Personnel.
Agreed.
Agenda item number 6, there's daily consultation on the draft equality impact assessment. Sorry, my apologies. We're moving with the times. We've all got tablets, but handwritten stuff here. Agreed. You don't think so, Gordon? You might not be that happy with it. The draft renewables obligation amendment order of 2014 is before the Assembly for debate on the 19th of May. I'd like to remind members that the committee was content on the proviso that it be reviewed in 12 months' time, and that the department has ensured and is satisfied that it is not creating a monopoly position, given that Lightsource state that they can work with a 7% return as the largest company, but BNRG believe a minimum 10% of return is required. So the department has confirmed that they'll review this policy in 12 months' time, but they've not yet given a written response to the second part of the committee's proviso. However, the clerk has been informed by the department that the minister will give assurances in regards to this.
Sorry, that's not quite accurate. Sorry, Chair, but the Chair has suggested that this committee ask the Minister to give those assurances in her speech on Monday, and that if members are content, the committee would be satisfied on that basis.
To get them when, sorry, Chair?
Monday, next Monday.
During the debate?
The debate?
Members happy enough to seek the assurances from the minister during that debate?
Monday week, is it?
No, it's Monday
Monday.
coming.
It's a short debate, isn't it?
It's in SL1, I think, is it? Or?
40 minutes. Or...
So, what do we do, Jim, if she doesn't agree to it? You'll not be able to advise us?
Well, I mean, we'd be recording this obviously and visiting as part of the minutes. So can we just caveat the position by, subject to, even though we expect the minister to clarify the issue, subject to, and then the minutes are either accepted or not when it comes to ratification. But that.
Well, it's affirmative resolution. It'll be debated on Monday. So if members are content, just to suggest that this committee would be content if the minister addresses that issue on Monday, and if I get an assurance from the department that that's going to happen in the meantime, I can inform members.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Enough?
Yep.
Sorry, is there a sheet on it before us? Is it
No, there's no
nothing here today?
Was it last Thursday we agreed to it? Or was it Thursday before?
It was a few weeks ago.
Right, okay. Agenda item number 6, there's a DADI consultation on the draft equality impact assessment on the gas network extension to the west and northwest. Papers for this item are from page 72 and include the consultation on the draft equality impact assessment. Have members any comments or content to note? Agenda item number 7, a written briefing from DADI, the Health and Safety Executive's operating plan for 2014-2015. You'll find this at page 120 and includes their operating plan. Have members any comments or content to note? Noted. Agenda item number 8, written briefing from DADI on the proposed revised approved codes of practice and guidance. Papers for this item are page 139 and include a cover note and the proposed revised approved codes of practice and guidance. Members any comments or is happy to note? Great. Agenda item number 9, correspondence, which you'll find at page 144. An invitation to the World in Your Classroom event to be held in the Long Gallery from 12:30 to 2 on Tuesday the 27th of May, which the Committee for Education is hosting with the British Council. You'll find that on page 145. The Committee Office will contact members in relation to attendance. There's correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel regarding post-project evaluations at page 148. Are members content to receive a breakdown of PPEs from the department, including the reason for any delays? Great. Yeah. There's an invitation to the Horizon 2020 conference at Titanic Belfast from 9:30 to 1:45 on the 27th of May at page 157. This has been issued to all members from the department, and can any member interested in attending contact the Committee Office? There's correspondence from the Ulster Bank providing information on issues requested by the committee at page 158. Members any comments, or are they content to note with the response to queries we raised at the briefing?
Noted.
Great. Agenda item number 10, any other business? There's no scheduled additional items of business. Do members have any additional items of business? Agenda item number 11, the date and time and place of the next meeting. There's no meeting next week due to elections. Next meeting of this committee will take place 29th of May in room 30 at 10 AM.